Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Tuesday Night Live. So, the winner of today's poll is the 432 Hertz conspiracy. And some of you were saying you didn't even know there was a conspiracy. Now, later on, some of you might be tuning in because you were listening to some healing frequencies on YouTube and this popped up. So, what is this conspiracy? Well, there's some theories that actually Nazis, yes, Nazis, changed the scale from 432 hertz, which is a healing solfeggio frequency, which we're going to get all into, and that they switched the Western scale to be tuned to 440 hertz, which is said in this conspiracy to lead to frustration, aggression, and even mind control. Now, we're going to get into a whole bunch of things today. We're going to get into the conspiracy, whether that's true or not. We're going to get into whether these healing frequencies are true or not. We're going to get into sound being used as a weapon, even beyond music. We're going to get into the origins of some of these beliefs, who came up with the solfeggio frequencies, who came up with the tuning it to 440. And we're going to get into a little bit of history. So, stay tuned for all of that. Hello, everybody. Welcome. Hi, everybody here. Welcome on TikTok as well. So, I want to give a little disclaimer here. I have no skin in the game. I've got no dog in this race. Okay. I don't really use the healing frequencies much. I'm not super invested in them. If you are super invested in them and you feel that they work for you, listen with open ears. If you're someone who is here because you want to see it debunked, listen with open ears, because based on all of the information that I've looked at today, I don't know what's the truth. So this is going to be up to you to see the truth. I'm going to show information that kind of suggests both. And I think when we go back to what is truth and we go back to the Hermetic principles, all truths are half truths. And I think that is once again where I stand, and where I stand with pretty much everything, is that all truths are half truths. So let's get into it. But before I get into it, I want to tell you my reason for making this video. So I received this. Oh, not that. I received this. Okay. I received this from a friend. And so a friend of mine is a musician, and they received an email from their distributor, from their music distributor last week, saying that Deezer and Meta have recently informed us that they are no longer going to accept content that meets the following criteria. The track genre listed as new age or inspirational, the release or any track title that contains the following matches: ASMR, meditation, for yoga, binaural beats, and 432 hertz. Now, Deezer is a huge music platform, has over 120 million songs, tracks on it. And this, even though it's referencing the titles, when looking into it, I found kind of conflicting information around the Deezer platform of whether they allow music that is tuned to 432 hertz. So the first time I looked it up that day when my friend sent it to me, I was like, oh, I'm going to do a TikTok on this. And then I started to go down a rabbit hole to the point where I didn't even know what to believe anymore. And that's how we got here, where we need a longer form of time to show you all of the information and then allow you to make a decision, as opposed to making a little 5-minute TikTok, which could prove or disprove anything in that amount of time. So, looking it up, Deezer said that they've never supported 432 hertz because basically, like, the standardization of equipment and all of it is tuned in this certain way, and this is what it is. Today, I looked it up and it says that, of course, they support 432 hertz. So this email allegedly came from someone's distributor, music distributor, and they were notified of this. It's specifically talking about the title, and it also mentions Meta as one of the things that is no longer going to be accepting healing frequencies, 432 hertz, etc. So let's talk a little bit about what is this conspiracy of 432 hertz. So I'm also, another disclaimer for you, Not only do I not have a dog in this race, I'm not a musician. So I will be referencing some other people's work here because I'm just unfortunately not musically gifted. So let's take a look at the 432 hertz versus the 440 hertz conspiracy. So I'm sure some of you, if you're clicking on this, you're already aware of it. But the Western scale of music, A4, is tuned to 440 hertz. The Solfeggio frequencies are said to be healing frequencies, and those are 432 hertz. So there's a theory that Nazis, specifically Joseph Goebbels, who was the minister of propaganda for the Nazi party in Germany during World War II, actually pushed to switch the Western scale away from 432 hertz to 440 hertz as a way of mind control, population control, and general aggression, disruption, frustration, sickness, illness, all of that. We're going to get into this. They also say that it was a push to be standardized by the Rockefeller Foundation. So we are going to get into the actual history of this stuff. 432 hertz, the reason why people say that this is kind of the sound of nature is because they're talking about the Schumann resonance. So that is another thing that when I've told you guys in the past, I was going to do a video on the Schumann resonance and I went down that rabbit hole and almost debunked myself into knowing whether it's true or not at all, or any of it is true, or any of the spikes are true or anything. So we're also going to get into that. But first and foremost, the most important thing here, I have notes off to the side of the screen. Oh, actually, before I get into that, one last thing, healing frequencies. So we have these things, solfeggio frequencies. I know that you guys have probably heard of these. You've probably seen on YouTube and other places. 432 hertz, 528 hertz is the sound of miracles, all of these things. We're going to get into what those meanings are. But there's something that we have to get into first, which is very important, which is what the hell is a frequency and what the hell is hertz? Let's start there. So I have tons of notes here and I'll try to pull some things up on the screen to assist in visuals with it. But okay. So us in this spiritual community, we talk about the vibes, right? The vibes, man. So what is the vibes? The vibe is the vibration, right? So what is a vibration? The vibration is, something moving back and forth, such as a string in music, a vocal cord. This causes a sound, right? We know everything is sound. We know everything. I think they said that God, like basically it was like a sound that created the whole universe. So what is a frequency? A frequency is how many times something vibrates per second. So high vibe would be higher vibrations. Low vibe would be lower vibrations. That means it moves less per second. So what is hertz? Hertz is the amount of times that something moves per second. The amount of times it vibes per second. So when they say like you need to be at a high vibe, what they're kind of saying is for you to be at a higher vibration, more hertz per second. So, for example, 100 hertz would be 100 vibrations per second. So, kind of examples of this within sound is like a low frequency would be like the sound of a bass, deep sound, a bass drum. And then high frequency would be high pitched, like say a whistle or something along those lines, sometimes like a violin or something like that. So that is where our baseline of what we're starting is. Okay. This is what hertz mean. This is what frequency means. This is what vibration means. Now, speaking of Nazis, before we get into this, let's talk a moment about Kanye West because maybe it was last year or the year before, Kanye West had a viral clip from some podcast where he talked about the 808 drum and how the 808 drum is tuned to make people sick and to disrupt their frequency, to disrupt their bodies, and that this was purposely put into popular music as a way to be using sound as a weapon. So what is that? What does that mean? The 808 drum is a drum machine that was created in the 1980s. So this drum machine is like what we hear in a lot of songs, right? Like I mean, like all popular songs are using this sound. And if you listen to it, you look it up what the 808 kick drum sounds like, you're going to realize that this is like the drum, the beat in like most pop music. I actually have a couple of examples. Um, Speaking of Kanye West, Love Lockdown, Beastie Boys, Paul Revere, Destiny's Child, Say My Name. These are the sounds that we're hearing with this 808 drum. So it's this kick drum. And so I looked it up. I'm like, okay, well, when that was all going viral, and we know that if sound has the ability to heal or if it has the ability to be a weapon, what is the frequency of this 808 drum? So typically we're hearing this drum in hip hop, EDM, trap music, dance music, things like that, some pop music as well. So it says that the frequency of this 808 kick drum is between 30 hertz and 60 hertz. So before we get even deeper into this conspiracy, let's talk about times that sound has been used as a weapon. Okay. That's really important for us to go over as well, because sound being used for healing, people have a hard time believing. I don't know. What do you think? Like I'm saying, this is for you to decide at the end of being presented all of this different information of all these different sources. It's for you to decide at the end what you believe, what you think. But we do have facts that sound has been used as a weapon before. So I'm going to give you guys some examples of that as well. Okay, so times that sound has been used as a weapon. Um, Obviously, in World War One, World War Two, World War Two, they used something called an acoustic cannon, which was also developed by a Nazi. Not surprising, right? His name is Albert Speer, and the device was aimed to use resonant chambers to create explosions capable of incapacitating or killing its targets. So actually sound could be used. Now, most likely it's not the frequency. Most likely it's the decibels that's being used. So there is a wide range of the ways that sound could be used as a weapon. So we're going to like at least clarify that without like over conflating things. Then we have also Operation Wandering Soul, which was used during the Vietnam War, where US forces used haunting audio recordings mimicking the voices of dead soldiers and physiological psychological to psychological destabilize the Viet Cong fighters. Now, these are some of the older ways. Now we have sonic weapons. Let me see. I think I have some stuff about sonic weapons on this page. Yeah, sonic weapons. So let me pull up my notes here. Okay. So the sonic weapons. Okay. So we have a lot of different versions of this. The long range acoustic devices, they emit highly directional sound waves at volumes up to 162 decibels, causing pain, disorientation, nausea. They're used for crowd control and military operations. The devices can target specific individuals or groups while minimizing sound to the surrounding area. We have the infrared sound weapons, which is sounds that are below the human hearing and that basically can cause disorientation, nausea, difficulties, and even organ damage. So, but a lot of times we're hearing these. So, what it says is these are below 20 hertz, which is below the human ability to hear. However, mostly it's using decibels to disrupt people. We have ultrasonic weapons, which are also um, used for incapacitating people and also targeting their inner ear and their brain, causing dizziness, headaches, unconsciousness. We have something called the squawk box, which in 1973 was used to emit ultrasonic waves that combined in the ear to produce ear splitting noises. It caused nausea, giddiness among rioters, and was precise enough to target individuals during protests. So we know this is used for crowd control, among other things. And then, so many, many, many examples of that stuff. And a lot of that stuff is more so about the decibels than anything. So we're talking about this because in order to talk about sound as healing, we have to also understand that sound could be used as a weapon, because a lot of times when I hear people talk about sound healing, as above, so below, it can be used both ways. Every single tool can be used for good or evil. A knife can be used to make beautiful sushi creation, or could be used to harm someone or yourself. So that's important for us to understand when we're talking about sound. So let's get into this little conspiracy here. So, what they say now, this whole thing of Joseph Goebbels and the Rockefeller Foundation, there's really no information that proves this to be true, that they purposely or even had any hand in. Sorry, I know. Sad to know, right? But we're going to get into so much stuff here. We're getting into all the details, all the deets. So there really is no information that connects those two players to the 440 hertz thing altogether. Now, also within this conspiracy that goes around is that they say that 432 hertz is the sound of nature. So I'm going to put up a little bit of information on the screen of some of the. Let's put this up here. Put it up all the way. Actually, I'll put myself back in there. And let's play this. Okay, so this is going to explain what this means. His name is Awesome Acoustics in English. This guy, Mario. It's going to be at 2 times speed. So
132 hertz actually means tuning the notes A4 to 432 hertz and deriving the rest of the frequencies from there. This tuning is sometimes called birdie tuning, but the discussion regarding this tuning is a very confusing topic, as there are several different tunings which are all called the same way. Sometimes, for example, when they speak of birdie tuning, they refer to an A4 equals 432 hertz tuning with equal temperament. Sometimes they refer to C4 equals 256 hertz with equal temperament, although this is actually something called scientific tuning, as I'll explain in a few moments. Sometimes they speak of C4 equals 256 hertz with Pythagorean tuning, where consequently A4 gives 432 hertz. Sometimes they use other types of just intonation, which can even be arbitrary to get certain specific frequencies. But generally, birdie tuning is associated with A4 equals 432 hertz. I think one reason for this confusion is that they typically do not specify the intonation. There can be many tunings with A4 equals 432 hertz, but with different intonations that give you different frequencies for the rest of the notes. As I mentioned a moment ago, the tuning called scientific tuning is based on C4 equals 256 hertz with equal temperament. This tuning is not used musically, but it has been used in some scientific papers for the convenience that all C notes are powers of 2. To tune in this way, we use this version of the formula for equal temperament. We have 256 here and 40 here, since C4 is the 40th key on an 88 key piano. I don't know of an engineer or scientist who actually uses this tuning, including myself. Naturally, we also stick to the standard A4 equals 440 hertz tuning when making music. A fascination with the number 256 is that it is an elegant number for being a power of 2, specifically 2 to the power of 8. However, if you calculate the frequencies with Pythagorean tuning based on A4 equals 432 hertz, C4 does not give you 256 hertz. Rather, you have to be based on C4 equals 56 hertz in order to get A4 equals 432. Okay, so that was a lot. And obviously I have it at 2 times speed. So hopefully you guys could hear that. Now, what we're seeing here on the screen is this idea that it's 432 hertz is the way that the A4 should be standard to, and then that the rest would follow that. It actually, he just explains that it doesn't really work that way, and that they talk about this thing scientific tuning. Now, I'm going to play a couple of more clips from this guy's work in a second, but that is a bit about the concept of how this idea that tuning to 432 would then populate these other healing frequencies and these numbers, but that actually is not the case when you see it done by someone who knows what they're doing. I don't know. I can't really tell you, but I at least wanted to get someone who understood what it was. And I have a couple of other clips by him. Now, I do want to say that is more of a debunking video. However, when we're trying to get information about stuff, we need to go to all the sources. Okay. Now, let's talk a little bit more about the history of what happened here with who did actually tune this stuff, right? Who actually changed this? So let's actually go to this one. So this guy's is Roel's World, and he talks about the history of this. So basically, he does a really good job. And you guys, I highly suggest you go to this roelsworld.eu and do more research on it. But really what he's showing is that tuning forks,
this was not standardized before that, and that tuning forks had all of these different things. So all different tuning forks were at different frequencies. It depended on the temperature of the room that the healing fork is in. So when people were tuning their instruments in all of these different times throughout history. Now, of course, this is going back to the 1800s. We probably don't have a lot of information for much earlier than that, but it does go to show that this was always a range that was happening. So they talk about 1834, this 52 tuning forks were tuned, and basically this is one version of it being to 440. Then we have also A being 441 in Paris with opera pianos, and then this is by this guy's tuning fork. And then we have also 440.5 in Paris in the 1800s. We have 439, 441. So we have all of these different tuning forks in all of these different instruments, different composers, different things. And basically that's what they were using as their tuning. So then we have, and this, there's many examples of this. And if you are a musician and you're interested in this topic, I highly suggest you do look into the history of it. They talk about the Baroque pitch. So during the 1600s to the 1760s, it was actually 415 hertz, and gives a whole bunch of different examples of different orchestras that were tuned to 457 hertz and all of these different things. So, and then of course they talk about that it was before Hitler was even born that the tone was at 440. So they're basically saying that it was not Nazis. Okay. Now, there's a lot of other things too that we see around this 432 hertz thing. And this is another good example where it's what's his name? Jakub Marian's Jakub Marian.com has also a great breakdown of it where he breaks down some of this stuff like the numerology of it and how they talk about all of the numerology behind it. But then he does go on to basically disprove that it was ever tuned to 432 hertz. Let me come back here. So this is some pretty interesting information here. Now, I do want to say, obviously, I'm aware of these healing frequencies, and we'll also talk about some studies that show that people listening to 432 hertz versus 440 have reported being more relaxed, feeling more calm, better breathing patterns. So we're going to get into that. And also, I have a friend who worked in a cancer clinic. Obviously, this is just this person's experience. But she said in the clinic that she worked in, a lot of the people that worked there were kind of into alternative theories and things like that. So they had suggested for some of their patients to use healing frequencies. So let me show you. She suggested an app and she says, where is it? Okay, this sonic frequency generator. So this is what she said that she used with her patients. And she said the people who used these frequencies and used this app, she personally noticed improvements in their health and their recovery. Now, of course, all of these frequency studies can show a lot of different things, right? Because with that, with a lot of these things, it's basically how much does someone want to heal? How much are they committed to their healing? So she noticed that the people who were using these frequencies had much more improvements in their health than the other patients did. But of course, that also means that these people were taking a more serious stance on healing because they were willing to try anything and willing to do anything. And their mind was in that place to be able to do that. Now, goes same thing with some of these frequency tests. Some of these studies around frequencies, they say that it's difficult to say how effective these healing frequencies are because it also depends on the subject. How receptive is the subject to this information? How receptive is the subject to these beliefs? And that's where we can go into some of using these frequencies yourself. If you're someone who believes that these frequencies work, then they work, right? If you're someone who doesn't believe that these frequencies work, then they don't work. So is it a placebo effect? Is it that everything in our reality is created by us? So there's many different things. Now, so let's see. Let's look at some of these other studies and stuff here. Let me look at my notes and see. I tried to put it in a good order of information. Okay, yeah. So let's talk about some of the standardization stuff. So it was in Okay, so then also 1859, France adopted A to be 435 hertz. 1939, there was a conference in London where the push for 440 came. And they said that this was driven by efforts to unify orchestral tuning throughout Europe and America, and that there's no historical evidence that links Nazis or Rockefeller or anything to this conference. But it doesn't necessarily mean they weren't there or that there was nothing there. I'm not saying 100%, you know? So then in 1955, the International Organization of Standardization, the ISO, officially adopted 440 hertz as the global tuning standard. And this decision was made for practical and technical reasons, not ideological ones. So they say, right? Obviously, things being 440 hertz used before the Nazi regime. They say that Steinway and Sons had already been using it since the early 20th century for consistency in their piano productions. And then there is claims that 440 induces anxiety, aggression, but obviously we don't have any studies to show that. Now, when we have these standardizations, and I'm playing both sides here, right? I'm playing both sides. I told you guys, I got nothing in this race, okay? I don't care who the winner or loser is, and I'm not going to declare one by the end. It's for you to decide. Now, if you've ever read the book Propaganda by Edward Bernays, so Edward Bernays is the grandfather of propaganda. Propaganda had been used already. However, Edward Bernays, who was the nephew of Sigmund Freud, I know the damage that the Freud family has done on this planet is astronomical. I'll do a video on that one day. But Edward Bernays is the person who used propaganda in the US towards American civilians and turned civilians into consumers. So if you ever want to read something super fucked up and demented, read Edward Bernays' Propaganda. Now, even though there's no evidence that is showing that these, Nazis, Rockefellers, standardization, everything is just for ease and consistency. Let me pull this up. I have it here. Just give me one sec. I have the PDF of the book. Let's see. PDF. No. Window. Sorry. Okay. Share window. Okay. Let's see. Is it up here? Okay, good. So this is an excerpt from the book Propaganda by Edward Bernays. And what he talks about is that actually, and it's very demented, this book, and he doesn't talk about it in a demented way because he's pro this, and this is what he thinks is good, and this is the truth, and this is what people should be doing, because he believed that the average civilian was too dumb to be able to decide for themselves, and that he believed in engineering consent. So he believed that you needed to engineer things to push the average person towards what's best for them. And what's best for them was usually for profit of some corporation that had hired him. So one of the things that he talks about in this book, so when I was digging into this 432 hertz conspiracy to do a video on it and then hit a wall because I saw so much information in both directions, the first thing that popped into my mind was this propaganda book. And if you see, he talks about how basically that these groupings or affiliations of society today are no longer subject to local and sectional limitations. When the Constitution was adopted, the unit of organization was village community, which produced the greater part of its own necessary commodities and generated its group ideas and opinions by personal contact. Okay, blah, 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 blah. So basically, he talks about how these associations, organizations, national this, all of those types of organizations seem to be neutral parties, but are actually pushing an agenda. And he says this is how you do propaganda. But he retitled propaganda as public relations. He invented the word public relations. And then so he says basically we have these following groups. So he gives a bunch of examples like Actors Equity Association, the International Advertising Association, the National or Aeronautic Association, blah blah blah. He gives the Anti-Cigarette League, the Anti-Profanity League, the Archaeological Association of America, the National Archery Association, American Astronomical Association, gives examples going on and on and on. National Corporation Reporter, the National Culinary Process, the National Dog Journal, these things, the National Jeweler, all he gives, and there's even more throughout the book. He gives the National Livestock Producer, all of these examples, the National Knitted Outwear Association, the all of these things, Association of Limb Manufacturers, the American Trap Shootings Association. And he gives these as all specific things, even to the National Pickle Packers Association. And he talks about how these are actually not neutral parties. And all of these are forms of propaganda. He talks about it in a positive light because he believed propaganda was a good thing. And he talks about how these were actually pushing specific agendas. And whenever we're seeing National Association and this and that, and the Standardization Organization of Music and this and that there always is some secret agenda that is there, and that this is how you get things done. And then he also talks about how these groups interlace, and he gives the example of people being a member of one, and it's a fraternal order, but then it's also a political party, and he's also part of the charitable organization one, and then a professional association one, and then the local chamber of commerce, and then another league for prohibition. So then he talks about groups how these groups are actually overlapping many times. So what appears to be a neutral organization is actually has members that are in all of these other groups and have all of these other agendas and appear to be a neutral body, which is making neutral things for standardization, for the good of all, for, creating certain things in certain industries that will allow you to, yeah, not the National Pickle Packers Association. Yeah, engineered consent sounds like a lack of actual consent. Yeah, exactly. I agree. So, yeah, and they sold us Freud. So this is the reason why Freud is so popular. It's not because Freud was some genius and really knew what he was talking about. It's because his nephew created public relations and used propaganda against civilians to create consumers. So that's why we keep hearing about Freud, because he had the best branding ever. So that's the other part of me here is, even though I'm not finding any evidence that links any of these people to these organizations that standardized it and that it was simply for technical reasons, when you really look at these organizations, not that this one is specifically mentioned in the book, there's a lot of evidence that shows that this is how these things work. And all of these things of standardization, like how to pack pickles, is actually something that is connected to something more nefarious. So let's talk a bit about these solfeggio frequencies. Okay. So, what are the solfeggio frequencies? Let me pull up the sources for that. And we're going to talk about, where did these solfeggio frequencies originally come from? Okay. So the history of the solfeggio frequencies, okay? So as we know, these solfeggio frequencies are what's considered these healing frequencies. So 432, very popular, right? But also 396 hertz, which, let me pull up my notes because my notes are, no offense, a little better than this. Okay, so 396 hertz, which is liberation from fear, guilt, It frees energy around guilt, shame. It grounds the listener. It's linked to the root chakra, and it could be used to be let go of blockages, fears, childhood traumas. 417 hertz, which is undoing situations, clears negativity from the past, linked to the sacral chakra. And 528 hertz, which is where we hear about the DNA repair and the love frequency and the miracle frequency. And it's believed to be like the original blueprint of humanity. And it's oftentimes, this is what you're seeing on YouTube as like these healing frequencies resonating with the solar plexus. It's been used in the water healing experiments, like Dr. Emoto, who did those freezing the water experiments. He used 528 hertz. And he was showing that this is like a frequency of love, of miracles, of manifestations. We have 639 hertz, which is healing relationships and connections, enhancing communication, understanding harmony in relationships, linked to the heart chakra. 741, the awakening intuition consciousness, which is basically cleanses the body of toxins. They say it can help with electromagnetic radiation. It's connected to the throat chakra, connected to detox, to clearing beliefs, to speaking your truth. 852, which is returning to the spiritual order, heightens intuition, connected to the third eye, connected to awakening. And then we have 963, which they say is a divine consciousness frequency, oneness frequency, sometimes called the God frequency, sometimes called the frequency of the pineal gland. It's associated with pure light, cosmic unity, crown chakra, astral projection, reuniting with universal wisdom. How do we see these things used? We see them used in sound baths. A lot of the bowls and things are associated with it. Let me pull this down for now, and when I get to the history of it. So we see this with sound bowls, and we see that these sound bowls are tuned to these specific frequencies. These specific frequencies are related to certain energy centers of the body called chakras. We also see them used with binaural beats, which is two different sounds in each ear. Ear. In each ear, and that basically these two frequencies together create some type of ability to go into an altered state. We also see this with the hemisync technology. Now, I don't know if the hemisync technology is specifically using any of these frequencies or if they're using other frequencies. If you guys have seen my interview with Mark Serto, who worked on the original Gateway experience, he was Robert Monroe's best friend in the 70s. He worked on the original hemisync technology to create out-of-body experiences. And now he has a platform called the Triad Mind. You guys know I've interviewed him on my page. He's incredible. I love the Triad Mind. Every time I do his meditations, I go to such a deep state of meditation, but he's using the hemisync technology. And this is a similar type of thing of the binaural beats, which is using the two different frequencies to train yourself to go to altered states. The hemisync technology is like the same type of thing, using two different sounds to get you to go into an altered state. Yeah, the Triad Mind. Honestly, I really highly suggest the Triad Mind. Like, those bring me to another dimension. I'm just telling you though, like I go to some crazy places, some deep shadow work. So they also claim that the 528 hertz is connected to the golden ratio and to sacred geometry. They also say that okay, we'll get into that. So then they also claim that the flower of life, the Merkaba, and things like that are associated with 963 hertz. Of course, all of this is very difficult to prove, right? Okay, so let's talk about this guy, Dr. Joseph Puleo, who in the 1970s rediscovered the Solfeggio frequencies. And he believed that these frequencies came from the Bible. So if any of you guys like to check stuff in the Bible, they say that it's the book of Numbers. Wait, I have it written here. Where's my notes? The book of Numbers, chapter 7, verses 12 through 83 is what he uses to discover these solfeggio frequencies in the 1970s. And he believes that these come from the Bible. I was not able to go a deep dive into that today. So if you want to, please do. And he has a book called Healing Codes for the Biological Apocalypse by Joseph Puleo. And he also believed that numerology was connected to these numbers as well. Now, let's see. Let me pull this up. So this is him. He did these different studies. Now, let's get into some of these other studies as well. Sorry, I'm mostly looking at my notes here, so. Okay. So then there was Dr. Glenn Rein, Rein, who did a DNA study. So he claims that he tested these different frequencies, but more so connected to Gregorian chants, Sanskrit chants, classical music, and rock music. So it is frequency sound testing. Um, they say that he did include the solfeggio frequencies, these healing frequencies. But also it shows that he used different types of music, and he found that Gregorian and Sanskrit chants enhanced UV absorption into the DNA. So basically, UV light was able to be absorbed into the body and to make an impact on the DNA when listening to these Gregorian chants, Sanskrit. And then he also did these with rock music and saw that it decreased the absorption. So it says the percentage was 5 to 9% of the DNA absorption. It was increased, and that it was actually decreased from the natural order when they used rock music. So this does a little bit go back to kind of, is the pop music and is the popular music disrupting to us and to our bodies? There was also a study in Japan that used 528 hertz, and it says it reduced stress markers, and also it helped the nervous system within 5 minutes. Now we have some other scientific studies on the vagus nerve. So basically, in 2018, the study published in Frontiers in Psychiatry found that sound-based vagus nerve stimulation significantly improved depression symptoms, and after 3 months, remission rates reached 17%, increasing to 33% after 1 year. So people who did vagus nerve. What are you saying? You're saying, "Girl, no, that makes no sense. Pull up a frequency analyzer. All songs have 432 and 440 in them." Pull it up. As I said in the beginning of the video, you might have just popped on. I have no dog in the game. I'm not a musician. I don't know. I don't have an ear for it. And what I'm doing is presenting all of the information on both sides of this, and this is for you to decide. I have no opinion on the matter, to be honest with you. You said you're an audio engineer. It's what you do all day long. Lovely. We have another source here to tell us. Great. But, you're going to keep calling me girl. Girl, hold on. I'm coming. I'll speak from the musician angle. Yeah. My friend Chelsea's coming. It's false, I promise. As I said, I have absolutely no preference on what is true here. If you would have came in the beginning of this, where I talked about how basically the tuning was always off and it was never 432. So everybody, like I said in the beginning of this, people who believe in the frequencies are going to be triggered. People who want to debunk the frequencies are going to be triggered, because I'm covering all sides of it. So anyway, let's get back to this vagus nerve stimulation study, which said that it could be done through either vocal exercises or sound vibrations, were shown to reduce stress, enhance circulation, and trigger the parasympathetic nervous system, promoting natural healing responses. So like I said, that's from the Frontiers in Psychiatry. A study was published there. Now, of course, we get also to, this is connected to the chakras, right? But everything could be say that they're connected to the chakras. So this is, okay. So for the solfeggio frequency, 396 is what they say. And they say this is the root chakra. The closest note in Western music is G4, which is 392 and is a 4 hertz difference. Then we have the sacral chakra, the next solfeggio frequency, which is 417, G4, AB4. Like I said, I'm not a musician. I don't know. Literally, I couldn't tell you. But That's 415, which is 1.7 off. 528 hertz, solar plexus. C5 is the closest, which is 4.75 hertz off from that. 639, the heart, the closest one, D5, is 600.75 hertz off. The throat chakra, 741, F5, which is 1.01 hertz off. And then we have the third eye, G5 being the closest, 21 hertz off, and 963, the crown, B5, which is 24.77 hertz off. So pull that down. Oh, thank you. Okay, let me look at some of the questions, some of the chat here, because like I said, this is what I was able to find. Like I said, I was provoked to make this video because the person who had sent me an email from their publisher, their distributor, saying that Deezer and Meta were no longer going to be allowing things that have the title 432 hertz. And so then I was like, okay, well, I need to look into this. I've heard about this 432 versus 440 conspiracy. As I'm looking into it, there's a lot of information on all sides of this. And, like you guys know, I'm a believer in the Kabbalion and the Hermetic principles. So these are where some of these other studies were. If you guys want to look at bettersleep.com, they claim that it's for healing. Now let's talk about the Schumann resonance. So the reason that they're saying that these certain frequencies are more towards healing and natural is because of Schumann resonance. And I've already broken some hearts on the Schumann resonance thing. All right. Because I was going to do a video last year about the Schumann resonance increasing the time, because that was in a book. I was like, oh, okay. It says that the Schumann resonance having these spikes is the reason why time is speeding up. Well, this was similar to this, where I started to look into it and actually debunked myself out of that idea. So let's talk a little bit about the Schumann resonance. Let me see if I have a video, a clip up for that. Let's see. Oh, okay. Yeah. So let me show you guys this too in the meantime. So that vagus nerve study, let me just show you that if you guys want to look it up on your own. Frontiers in Human Neuroscience did it. It was called Breath of Life, the respiratory vagal stimulation model of contemplative activity. That's that study. Then we have this other study, which is the possible mechanisms for the effects of sound vibration on human health. And in this study, they focused on different frequencies. Let me see if I have notes on this one. I don't have the notes on it. So check this out too. This is another study which says that the frequencies have helped people in these different ways, and that so take a look at that. That's called this. You can look that up. I highly suggest you guys do look these things up and decide for yourself. I can just present you. I'm going to close most of these tabs up. Okay, so then let's look at this guy's stuff. Let me see. I have, what time? 3:36. Okay, so then another reason why people believe this is because of the cymatics of it. So let's take a look at some of this cymatic stuff, right? So cymatics is when, let me see. Trying to decipher the Bible verses. Okay. So cymatics is when people use sound on a certain surface and the vibration of it creates images. So I'm going to show you guys a couple of examples of that, what cymatics are. So you could see here. Oh, whoops, sorry. Okay. So these are the cymatics, and then these are basically using things at 432 hertz versus 440 hertz, showing that there's different imagery being created by these different sounds. So this is another reason why people believe in the I'm sorry. A lot of people believe in this. So these are showing, let me see. Yeah. So these are showing different examples of 432 hertz. Now, this is sand. The first one was with water. And then these are showing the difference between 432 hertz. This one is 440 hertz. It's blurry. And it's basically showing that like the images are more beautiful in 432 hertz than they are at 440 hertz. Now, I want to show you this other guy who explains.
Resonance patterns in water or in plates, sometimes known as cymatics. Basically, if you introduce vibration frequencies into a container with water or a plate with sand on top, the vibrations will form different shapes at different frequencies. This is true and can be calculated mathematically. However, one argument made by believers of 432 Hz is that some patterns are ugly because the frequencies are harmful, and other patterns are pretty because the frequencies are harmonious and healthy. First of all, this way of rating patterns as pretty or ugly is completely subjective. There is no objective standard or rating system to categorize the patterns as one thing or another. However, there is something more important than that, which is that the patterns do not depend only on the frequencies, but also on the dimensions of the surface and the material through which the sound travels. I will now explain why this is relevant for resonance. When a wave travels through a medium and suddenly there is a termination or a change of material, the wave is reflected back. Some examples are a wave in a duct hitting a wall, or sound traveling through a metal bar and reaching the edge. Resonance occurs when the wavelength is 2 times one of the dimensions of the medium, or an exact fraction of that length. This applies to ducts that are open or closed at both ends. For a duct open at one end but closed at the other, the formula is slightly different, but we will not talk about that for now. Let's look at the example of a wavelength equal to half the length of the duct. To make the example clearer, I will show the reflections separately. When the wave is reflected a second time, the crests and troughs will coincide with the first wave that is still propagating. When 2 waves overlap in this way, the resulting wave has twice the amplitude. The same thing happens with the third reflection and the first reflection.
So what you see here, obviously the different sounds, the surface, the size are all factors of this vibration. So it's not simply what the frequency is. And then he gives a lot of different examples. And one of the other things, okay, so then let's talk about the Schumann resonance stuff. He does a good job of that.
For example, they make the argument that the electromagnetic resonance of planet, the water molecule, or various organs of the human body, such as the brain or the heart. For example, they make the argument that the electromagnetic resonance of planet Earth is 8 Hz. And since 256 and 432 are multiples of 8, then this tuning resonates more harmoniously with the Earth and promotes good energies. But here are a bunch of reasons why this just isn't a valid argument. First of all, 440 Hz is also a multiple of 8 Hz, so what's the problem? Tuning A to a certain frequency doesn't make all your music resonant to something, only the A notes. What about the other notes and the musical scales that don't include the A note? Especially the semitones close to A would still be very harmonious with the universe or whatever. The Earth has a series of electromagnetic resonances known as Schumann resonances, and the first one is what they refer to as the 8 Hz resonance. However, the first electromagnetic resonance of the Earth is not exactly 8 Hz, but 7.83 Hz. So 432 is not a multiple. And if we look at the frequencies associated with the water molecule or with human organs, we see that they have absolutely no significant relationship with the numbers 8, 256, or 432. Earth's resonance is electromagnetic, while sound is not electromagnetic but mechanical waves. But what is the difference? A sound wave is mechanical, that is, what vibrates is matter, so groups of atoms. Meanwhile, light is an electromagnetic wave, that is, what vibrates are electromagnetic fields, which are not matter. Sound cannot travel through space, but electromagnetic waves can. Another important difference is the wavelength. Just as a small reminder, light is a type of electromagnetic wave, so the speed of electromagnetic waves is simply called the speed of light. Electromagnetic waves have different wavelengths than mechanical waves, even for the same frequencies. This is because the speeds of sound and light are quite different. The speed of sound, dry air, 20 degrees Celsius, is 343 meters per second, while the speed of light in a vacuum is almost 300 million meters per second. For example, if we compare the wavelength of an electromagnetic wave and a sound wave, both at 8 Hz, we see that both wavelengths are in a completely different order of magnitude, by a factor of almost 900,000. And if the wavelengths of light and sound are different for the same frequencies, that means that the size of an object can match one type of wave, but not the other. That is, something that resonates electromagnetically at a frequency is hardly going to resonate acoustically.
Okay. He does a good job explaining that. Now, what I had found, so in the past, they believe that the Schumann resonance is the heartbeat of the world. And I'm sure you guys have seen these spiritual videos where they talk about the Schumann resonance peaked, it spiked today. It's never done this before. And I was doing a video about that once, and I actually had a similar experience. I kept researching, and then I realized, oh, this is all completely normal. It is always spiking, actually. And solar flares, solar wind, lightning, any type of atmospheric changes, seasonal variations, water, magnetic disturbances, any of those things can cause these spikes in the Schumann resonance. Now, does it affect humans? There is some different studies that says that this 7.83, which they say is the heartbeat of the earth, corresponds to alpha brain waves, which is between 8 and 12. And they say that, 8 to 12 is when you're hearing things at that sound, at that frequency, it can lead to more relaxation, more meditative states. It can also, sorry, TikTok. Oh, I didn't get the capture right on one try. Okay. So also they talk about that it has like stress reduction and things like that when you're at those similar things to the Schumann resonance. So, what does this all say? What is this all saying? Let me see if I have other notes here. So we know sound has been used as a weapon. There is things that show that certain sounds can be more relaxing, more healing. Like I said, my friend that worked in that cancer facility claimed also that she did notice an improvement in those patients who used that app Sonic and took time with it each day. Is it a placebo effect? Is it if you do something consciously, listening to something and associate that with healing, then is your mind doing the healing versus the frequency? Or we know everything is frequency, right? Everything is energy. In some of these channeled messages, one of the things that always stuck out to me that I do believe, and I just don't think that humans are here yet, where they say that light and sound is the same thing. But because we get it through two different holes, you know, three, kind of, right? Because we make sound, we receive sound through the ear, but basically I meant my eye. I don't know why I pointed at my mouth. But because we receive these waves through two different places, through our ears and through our eyes, because of our human body, we see sound and light as two separate things, but that actually higher advanced species outside of Earth see them as one thing or perceive sound and light to be one thing and that it's the same. And as we know, everything around us is waves and sound and light waves. So we do know that certain things are impacting those waves. So if you were to play something, we know that know that these certain decibels and certain frequencies have the ability to make someone sick, to disrupt them. We know because it's used in psionic weapons. So who says that it can't be used the other way to if it's all waves around us of sound and light, some of these things impact those waves. We also know that our brain is operating on waves. And we also know that our heart, your heartbeat, because it's a physical thing, it emits waves and it has the ability. We also have seen these studies where human energy is able to impact, air molecules when they're basically, like air molecules are all over the place, bouncing everywhere. But then if they put like a piece of a human DNA in there, the air molecules start to go in the spiral of the DNA. So we know that the human can impact the waves around it. So also these waves could potentially affect the waves that are around us, affect the sound and the light waves around us, and actually be received by our eyes and ears and allow our body to kind of work on that frequency, which we know leads to more meditative or relaxing things. Or it's all placebo. Who knows? Who knows? That's why I said in the beginning of this, if you're looking to debunk, I might trigger you. If you're looking to believe, I might trigger you because at the end of the day, I have the loyalty to the information, not to, just because someone that I like, someone that I listen to or respect their work says that these healing frequencies do this, or someone that I think is a fraud says that these work or don't work. So like putting aside the fact that basically wherever I've heard it, whether I like the person or believe them or think they're honest or don't think they're honest, and whether I know people who say it helps them or people who say nothing helps them, or, sound engineers who say that it doesn't matter. We have musicians that tune their music to that music, you know, we'd have the sound bowls. We know that the sound bowls are super feel good, tuning forks feel good. right? So it really is up to each individual person to be able to decide what they like. You said taking a break from TikTok, so appreciate this live. Oh, thanks, Francisco. Yeah, the TikTok chat is a little out of control today, right? Because you know what? Like, obviously, this thing kind of falls into what people will call pseudoscience. I think a lot of pseudoscience is just um, science is behind on, because we already know like how many things are constantly coming out in scientific studies that haven't been fully updated yet. Let me look at my things here. Let me see if there was anything else I wanted to show you guys. Oh yeah, I did. I did want to show you this guy's thing about the chakras, right? Let me look. I thought he had something about. Oh yeah, here we go. Okay, let's play this guy's other thing here.
In numerology, and to keep in mind that numerology is not at all significant in science. In some examples, they propose a tuning where the list of frequencies are only whole numbers. For them, this means that the numbers are more exact and therefore more pure and harmonious. In music, however, the ratio between the frequencies is always perceptually more important than the frequency values themselves, because the frequency ratios are what produce harmonies. Forcing numbers to have no decimals will simply give you less harmonic proportions. There is this YouTuber called Adam Neely, a professional musician and academic, who also addresses this issue, but from a more musical point of view. He simply tunes his keyboard to different A4 equals 432 Hertz tuning systems, improvises, and comments on how it sounds. So maybe we're targeting too many chakras at the same time? His point is that to suggest certain frequencies and tunes for music, first one should try making actual music with them and know what they sound like. I highly recommend that you watch the original video and Adam's channel in general. Whether or not a number has decimals does not make it more pure or perfect. I give you the example of the legendary number pi. This number is irrational. That is, it has an infinite number of decimal digits and cannot be expressed as a fraction. But just because of that, are we going to say that pi isn't ugly any perfect number? No, pi is one of the most beautiful numbers that exist because it describes circles, which are a fundamental geometry of the universe. In fact, the sine waves that describe vibration phenomena are derived from circles.
All right, so are you familiar with the way that the Monroe Institute uses it? Yeah, so that's actually what I was talking about with the HemiSync technology before. So Mark Serto was the original sound engineer who worked with Robert Monroe in the 70s. And then he also helped develop some of those frequencies that are still used at the Monroe Institute. And now he has his own platform called the Triad Mind. So two different frequencies does cause an altered state. We do know that that's true. And like I said, use the triad mind. That stuff gives you an altered every time I use it, I go into an altered state. Yes, the nuance and paradox holder, JK Ultra. Yes. Jen channeling the Hertz frequencies of understanding in the live today. Very true. Switched to YouTube for TikTok. Hi, chat. Yeah, I think the TikTok's a little out of control today. Let's see. What does being super sensitive to sound mean? I think that's a lot of things. Sometimes being sensitive to sound could mean that you have a gift for it. It could also mean that you have like wounds or triggers around sound, like maybe, you had a family that screamed a lot or like banged things or something like that. And it makes you super sensitive to sound. Or, it could be kind of the tuning of your ears or, also, hi. So it could be a lot of things, it could be being musically inclined. So we're going to wrap up the live here, but I have a guest here. Let's see. Sensory issues. Yeah, I agree. Sensory issues could be probably one of the main thing. Do you remember the app?
Hey, what's up, everyone? What up, Tuesday Night Live? Hey. So where'd you guys leave off?
That there's no official answer.
Yeah, it's all relative. It's all relative. So something that you did bring up right as I was getting out of the car that I was listening to was we don't live in a vacuum. So the perfect 432 is not a factor because it's all relative to whatever the room is or whatever the space is. Like you were talking about the boards with the sand vibrating on it. That's because of how big the plate is and how much sand is on the plate that is creating those images. That is also a large part of why that's happening. But it's also kind of going back to the Kybalion of the half-truths. It's also, there are certain things that do make you feel good. And like, we've all heard feedback from a microphone. That feels bad. We don't like that. It hurts your ears. That is something that happens. Yes, it's also because you're in a space, you're in proximity, so on and so forth. But also, pitch is relative. The reason this started happening was Verdi, who is a composer and a musician in France, was creating an opera. And the singers, not the musicians, but the singers became obviously divas because their vocals get tired where the other instruments aren't living, right? So he said, okay, I'm going to tune down so I don't put as much strain on their vocals and they don't become a fucking diva and make everything about them. So he tuned it to 432. However, at the same time, London's orchestra was tuning to 450 or 455, something really high. Now, the reason we all went with a standardized or national or global, rather, almost global, but let's say Western pitch for A is because of the mass manufacturing of instruments. So this was also something that was coming out that everybody wanted to be able to play music all over without worrying, because all of this came from Gregorian chants from starting. Like A was the lowest note that the Gregorian chants could go to, but that changed from monastery to monastery or cloister to cloister. So they're trying to figure out what is the through line. So, and then I think in the 1700s, someone invented a tuning fork, which was then the standard as they could all kind of get a pitch on that sound. But it's honestly, it's all relative. And if it makes you feel good to listen to 432, then great. But if it makes you feel good to listen to 440, great too. People also bring this up around what is the kick drum? The 808 kick drum.
Yeah, we started with that.
Which is my favorite kick drum. I love an 808. It's my favorite. Now, people are like, no, it's demonic or whatever. No, it's not. It's not demonic. It's a quote unquote dark sound because it's so deep, potentially. You could read it that way, but it is not demonic in nature. That's crazy. But you also can't ban a frequency. That was something that was coming out, like 432. Some girl was trying to clap back earlier.
Oh, was she? I missed it.
I don't know. No, you can't ban a frequency of 432. It does not work that way. Because there are many frequencies in everything. Like we were saying.
Okay, so you as a musician and a shamanic healer, what do you think? Final statement about the healing frequencies, the Western scale. Do you think there was some nefarious things? Do you think the healing frequencies work?
I do not think there was a nefarious agenda. I think honestly, it was trying to help the singers and the vocalists and the musicians all relatively get a hive mind, if you will, together of this current age, where before there were many different ones. This is this current age. Number two, I do believe in healing frequencies. I love sound bowls. There was this really beautiful, however, I think healing frequencies are relative. So there was this beautiful video, either you or Ryan sent me, that it was someone playing a tuning fork next to one of those balls, the balls that swing back and forth and hit each other. he was playing a tuning fork and there was another tuning fork touching those balls that swing back and forth, right? One frequency wouldn't resonate with the one touching the balls. However, when he did hit a tuning fork that did resonate with that other tuning fork, the other balls moved. And it was saying, this is how you know you found people who are on the same wavelength as you, the same frequency as you, because it literally resonates and you'll see it happen. So I think it really depends who you are. What are you interested in? What are you surrounding yourself with? Are you actively playing into that mindset or not? Whether it's 432 or 440, if you hear an A pitch, does that resonate with whatever chakra that is? I forget which one it is.
Which one?
A? What is A?
Well, based on
I should know this.
Based on this, of those solfeggio frequencies, there actually isn't a 432, but it's 417 or 528.
But what is A?
Oh, 440 or 432.
No, what chakra?
Oh,
What's in the 400s?
the sacral, but it says that's a G, A, B. I don't know what that means.
I have it on a chart somewhere. I don't know why I'm tripping. I forgot. But if you assign that to it, then let that ride with it. I use healing bowls all the time. I don't know what their pitch is, but I send my energy into it. And because it's undeniable, it's a sound, you put it in. A lot of times also dissonant sound comes from two conflicting pitches. What do you think about the tuning forks 3,000 feet down below in the pyramids? I have no idea about what that is. I don't know about that, but it sounds cool. Sounds like it might have been resonating something.
All right. So everybody, thanks for joining into the Tuesday Night Live, and thanks for Chelsea for popping in to bring the musical perspective in. Thanks everybody for tuning in on TikTok. And let me know. I'm sure there'll be some debate in the comments later for people listening later on. And I like what you said about the different frequencies of the different people too, because for me, I do not like high pitched sounds. So it's why I don't like trance music. It hurts my ears. I don't like a lot of the healing frequencies that are very high pitched. Like they literally make my skin crawl.
Yeah.
But I like a lot of the very low ones, which are like sometimes, whatever it says on the screen, who knows if that's what it really is. But sometimes it'll be like 10 hertz. And I'm like, oh, this is my jam right here. So like, and I don't know if any of those things are even true or right. But like, then exactly what you're saying is that then it really depends on the person, what their wavelength is, what they're at, of what frequency. So like, even though there's like these standard reason of what each thing is used for or what it helps with, it's up to every person to really see what they
resonate with.
Yeah.
Because honestly, 432, when I hear songs pitched down to 432, it sounds dissonant to me because my ear is so used to 440. So when I hear it, I'm like, oh, something sounds off about that. So again, it really depends. And I'd love to get an Eastern perspective because I don't know what they use for their A. But that's all I got.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for coming to the Tuesday Night Live. Make sure you like it. Oh, and last thing, Jennifer Sodini is on this week's coming Ultra Minds podcast. So make sure you tune in on Thursday. She has a new deck coming out. This is her last deck. I haven't gotten the new one yet, called the Modern Nirvana Oracle here. But then she has Be Not Afraid, the new angel deck about biblically accurate angels. So see you guys then. We're going to talk all about biblically accurate angels, fallen angels, and all the things in between. So see you guys then.